podcast is sponsored by Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. It gives you everything you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. Creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. They'll distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere, even on platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. Once again, you can download the Anchor app, that's ANCHOR, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hey y'all, my name is Christian, I'm a millennial, and this is the Millennial Mind. Millennials get a bad rap for being lazy, non-productive members of society. We also get told that our opinions are warped and don't matter. This podcast is designed to express a point of view on the world as a whole, but from a millennial's perspective. I will talk about love, current events, pretty much everything that comes to mind. Come join me on this journey on speaking my mind, and I would love for you to speak your mind as well. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of The Millennial Mind. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey of speaking my mind, and I hope that all of you are speaking your mind as well. I wanted to continue our discussion on the unsung heroes of Black history because we just don't hear a lot about them. We always hear about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Rosa Parks. And don't get me wrong, those individuals paved the way for African Americans in our present society. But what about the people that we don't hear much about? This is my opportunity for me to give them the props that they deserve. And I'm going to do so by informing you all of these unsung heroes. And while I was doing my research, I just learned so much about these people. So it's just interesting, and I hope that you find it interesting as well. The first person that I would like to talk about is Jane Bolin. Now, this lady is very interesting to me because I'm an attorney, and she went that route as well. So I'll tie that in with what she's known for. But Jane Bolin became the nation's first Black woman judge in 1939. When I was a child, I always wanted to be a judge, and I had no idea that Jane Bolin was the first African American judge. I wasn't even thinking that there was one out there because it's something you don't hear about. But this is incredible. Jane Bolin served on New York's family court for 4 decades. She was also the first Black woman to graduate from Yale Law School. Besides from dealing with many domestic cases, she worked on stopping probation officers from getting assignments based on the color of their skin. During her career, she also worked with Eleanor Roosevelt. Together, the two women created a program that would help stop young boys from committing crimes. So the only difference between me and Jane Bolin, she was doing more criminal stuff. And I guess domestic, that's a little bit of civil, but I do mostly civil law. But that's amazing that she used her platform to allow probation officers to get assignments regardless of the color of their skin. And then developing programs for boys to stop committing crimes. Because as we all know, with young people, once they commit crimes and go to jail or go to juvie, the probability of them committing more crimes and going back to juvenile detention center gets even higher. So for her to develop a program that what helped with that is amazing. And I hope that it's continuing today. Another person I want to talk about is Alice Allison Dunnigan. She was the first African American female White House correspondent. She was also the first black female member of the Senate and House of Representatives press galleries. Her love for writing began when she was 13 years old, writing one-sentence pieces for the Owensboro Enterprise. She would go on to teach history for a Kentucky public school for 18 years. She became the chief of the Associated Negro Press in 1947, which would allow her a year later to become the first female African American to follow a president's campaign out on the road. While she had to pay her way to cover Harry S. Truman on his Western campaign trail, she would finally receive the respect she deserved when John F. Kennedy was elected. She would serve as an education consultant of the President's Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity until 1965. So anyone who loves politics, this is a person to look up to. Not only being the first African American female White House correspondent, but also the first black female member of the Senate and House of Representatives press galleries. That's huge, especially in the time period that she was in, which was between the 40s and the 60s, and civil rights was still something that African Americans didn't have. So for her to be in that kind of position was God-given. Another person I would like to talk about is Claudette Colvin. 9 months before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, a then 15-year-old Claudette Colvin did the same. On March 2nd, 1955, Colvin was taking the bus home from high school when the driver ordered her to give up her seat. Colvin refused, saying she paid her fare and it was her constitutional right, but was then arrested by 2 police officers. Colvin later became the main witness in the federal lawsuit Broder v. Gale, which ended segregation on public transportation in Alabama. Now, Claudette Colvin I knew nothing about, because when you think about the first person who gave up their seat on public transportation, you automatically think of Rosa Parks. You didn't know that there was someone before her who was a lot younger who actually paved the way for Rosa Parks. So for this young girl who was 15, and her mind isn't fully developed as an adult is, but for her to have the mind and the courage not to give up her seat because she paid her fare and it was her constitutional right to sit wherever she wanted to sit was so brave. And unheard of. Like at 15, I wasn't doing that. I don't know what I was doing at 15, but I wasn't doing that. I was dealing with my my hormones being out of whack. That's pretty much what I was doing, and being angry all the time. But for this girl to even know what her constitutional rights were at 15 is huge. It is huge. And we do not hear about her story at all because it's all about Rosa Parks. And nothing against Rosa Parks, but just knowing that someone paved the way for Rosa Parks to do what she did is amazing to hear. And we should really hold Miss Colvin in higher esteem. Another person I would like to talk about is Anna Arnold Hedgeman. Hedgeman was an advocate who worked with religious organizations and within the government to mobilize the civil rights movement. Hedgeman became the first African American graduate of Hamline University in 1922. She later worked for a number of religious organizations, most notably the Young Women's Christian Association. Hedgeman also held various roles in the government, including working on Harry S. Truman's re-election campaign in 1948 and serving in the cabinet of New York Mayor Robert F. Wagner from 1954 to 1958, the first African American to do so. Hedgeman was also instrumental in the planning of the historic March on Washington in 1963. I wonder, did she know Alice Allison Dunnigan since they both worked with Harry S. Truman? I wonder if they saw each other on the campaign trail. But that's interesting to have such an impact on civil rights and civil rights activism is just huge. Another person, another unsung hero that we don't hear much about is Amelia Boynton Robinson. She has been recognized for her tireless civil rights advocacy in recent years, including a portrayal in 2014's movie Selma, but many may not know just how pivotal a figure she was. Boynton Robinson began her civil rights activism in the 1930s when she started advocating for voting rights after becoming one of the few African American women registered to vote in Selma, Alabama. Boynton Robinson became the first African woman in Alabama to run for Congress in 1964, and the following year she helped Martin Luther King Jr. plan the march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, for March 7, 1965, now known as Bloody Sunday. Boynton Robinson and the roughly 600 demonstrators were forcefully attacked by state troopers with tear gas, billy clubs, and whips. Boynton Robinson was hospitalized after the march, and a horrific photo of her injuries was widely circulated. Later in 1965, Boynton Robinson was invited to the White House when President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, and in 1990 she received the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Medal. So with the march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, you always hear how Martin Luther King organized that, but you don't hear about the demonstrators that walked with him. Amelia Boynton Robinson was one of those demonstrators, and I didn't know who she was either, and including her portrayal in Selma, in the movie Selma. Now I have to go back and watch it. But to see her bravery and how she was advocating for voting rights and willing to risk her life in order for African Americans to have the same civil liberties as others was huge. And if it wasn't for her and the other people who did that march in Alabama, a lot of us wouldn't be where we are today. Moving right along, another unsung hero of Black history is Daisy Bates. Daisy Bates was a civil rights activist best known for her work on behalf of the Little Rock Nine. Bates and her husband founded the Arkansas State Press, a weekly African American newspaper that advocated for civil rights. In 1952, Bates became the president of the NAACP's Arkansas branch, and in 1957, Bates fought for the Little Rock Nine, the 9 black students who were attending an all-white school as part of the school's desegregation. Bates escorted and advocated for the students amid intense opposition. She is honored by the state of Arkansas with a state holiday on the third Monday of February. So Miss Bates helped with desegregation in Arkansas. So it looks like she did a lot of work in Arkansas that kind of transcended all over the country. So thank God for Miss Bates, because if she didn't help those 9 students in Arkansas move forward with the school's desegregation, it's no telling what would have happened. Okay, and then there's one more person that I would like to talk about. And her name, and we hear about her a little bit, she's a little bit more known than others. Her name is Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm was a pioneer for African American women holding major roles in the government. Chisholm first served as an educational consultant for New York City's Bureau of Child Welfare and ran for New York State Assembly in 1964. In 1968, Chisholm was elected as the first African American congresswoman and later became one of the founding members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Chisholm made history once again in 1972 when she became the first African American woman of a major political party to run for the Democratic Party nomination, which that is huge too. So that actually paved the way for a lot of people to run, such as Barack Obama and Jesse Jackson when he ran. So if it wasn't for Shirley Chisholm, we probably would not have had a Barack Obama for president. So thank God for Shirley Chisholm. What do you all think about these unsung black heroes? Are there some unsung black heroes that you would like for me to discuss? Let me know. Email me at mindofmillennials@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on our Facebook page, The Millennial Mind. Make sure to check out previous episodes of the podcast on Anchor, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And before we go, I always have a quote for you all. And this quote comes from Muhammad Ali. He said, "If your dreams don't scare you, they aren't big enough." Let me say that again. If your dreams don't scare you, they aren't big enough. Couldn't have said it better than myself. Thank you, Mr. Ali. And thank you all so much for listening. Until next week, I will see you soon.